So we are one full day away from a fantastic football game, and y'all already know we're here today in the morning talking all things you need to know about college football. We've got a full show in front of us. We need to talk about Alabama and Nick Saban apparently bullying the media, something we need to break into. We also need to take a look at the Big Ten, something we haven't done just yet, and talk about a team that I find really intriguing within the Big Ten in Michigan and ask the question, can they win the Big Ten? Finally, we need to talk about something I was wrong about just yesterday, and we need to revisit the conversation. And finally, we need to talk about something that the Oklahoma Sooners need to do on offense to help out their defense. All things I'm very excited to get into as y'all come in, hit the like button, get active in the chat. It's going to be a great time. But I think the best place for us to start is on our first topic. And Dominic asks, are you live or pre-recorded? No, this is live right now, man. All of our shows are live. I might get into some pre-recorded stuff maybe next week or the week after, but right now everything is live on air. If I mess it, it's all right here. It's all live. But let's kick this off with talking about Alabama and Nick Saban bullying the media. Because yesterday, as so many teams were releasing a depth chart, Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide chose not to. And if you listen to certain members in the media, you would have thought Nick Saban walked into their house, snatched their puppy, slapped them in the face, and kissed their wife before walking out. I was a little bit perplexed by this, and I didn't quite understand why there were so many people that were so upset about Nick Saban not releasing a depth chart. And then as I listened to Tim Brando explain why he took issue with it, in fairness to Brando, one of the things he was saying did make sense to me. Saying, hey, as a media member who broadcasts the game, this is my depth chart. And Tim Brando did show his depth chart that had all the notes. And his point was, you're making it much more difficult on the media member's job if we don't get a depth chart. But the part where Tim Brando absolutely lost me is that within the same breath of saying that, he then backed it up by saying, but Nick Saban probably gave it to them anyways, which really defeated the whole point to me. If your main concern is saying, hey, I think that they need a depth chart because we need to do our job, then that's fine. But then don't say Nick Saban is bullying, but oh yeah, by the way, he probably gave it to them anyways. If he gave the media chart to them anyways, then your whole complaint here is moot, and the point of him bullying is moot. So as I was sitting there listening to Tim Brando, he did have a good point at the beginning where he was saying, hey, whenever you are coming in here as a media member, you need to know what to expect on the football field. I can understand that. But at the point where you yourself, you as the claimant of the complaint, are saying, hey, we need to be able to do this, but Saban gave it to them anyways, then I think you've probably answered your own complaint. And that is what really perplexed me, was to see these media members, such as a Tim Brando, raise a point that had validity to it, then answer his own argument, then proceed to say, oh yeah, even though I've already satisfied my own complaint, my own worry, because I've already admitted that Nick Saban's going to give it to the media members in due time before the game, he's bullying. I didn't know that I quite understood that. And we heard the same thing, similar at least, from a Paul Feinbaum, where he took offense to Nick Saban not releasing the depth chart. And I guess one of the questions I have, if we're not thinking about this from a broadcast perspective, because Tim Brando poignantly pointed out that Nick Saban will give that depth chart to the media members that it matters, which then defeats the purpose of him saying Nick Saban is bullying the media, because Tim Brando answered his own point. I digress. What difference does it make if Nick Saban releases a depth chart, or if Nick Saban releases a depth chart and beside every name there's or? At that point, there's functionally no difference. So I was perplexed by this whole notion that it was offensive that someone not release a depth chart. Jim Harbaugh used to be famous for not releasing a depth chart. It didn't move me in the slightest that he didn't release a depth chart. If the people that were calling his games had access to the information that they needed to do their job, then it doesn't matter. Nobody has seen anybody play. All of this is going to be brand new. So is Nick Saban and Alabama bullying the media? Certainly not. And I think that that's a ludicrous claim for someone like Tim Brando to make right after, in the same breath, saying, oh, yeah, but he's going to give them the media book anyways. So how is he bullying? Those two ideologies don't exist in the same reality. And Paul Feinbaum taking offense to this, we've gotten to a point where it seems as if no matter what Nick Saban does, there will be someone taking offense to it. This is the same man who this offseason has had to listen to talking heads such as Paul Feinbaum say his legacy could be tainted because he didn't win a national championship last year. I want you to think about that Nick Saban's legacy could be tainted because Georgia is on a historic run right now. By the way, Kirby Smart, where did he get apprenticed from? So Nick Saban teaches Kirby. Kirby goes out, has success. Nick Saban has all the rings you could imagine. Nick Saban has as many rings as some powerhouses do in their history. But his legacy is tainted because he lost a close game to Georgia in the national championship and then didn't make a college football playoff when they lost 2 games by 4 points. Ladies and gentlemen, if that's tainting your legacy, then a lot of coaches, they're going to have a whole hard time when it's all said and done. If 2 losses by 4 points taints your legacy, I don't know what standard we're holding anybody to at this point. It comes to a certain point where it feels like people are talking to hear their own voice, quite frankly. And I'm not saying everybody, but certainly Paul Feinbaum. It comes to a point where it seems like he's talking to hear his own voice. 2 losses taints a legacy. That was absurd to me. So we get to this point where Nick Saban doesn't release a depth chart. We went through the whole depth chart that I predict it will be yesterday. And in fact, in fairness, probably Monday or Sunday, we'll sit down and talk about what Alabama's starting lineup was as compared to what I had it as and do a compare and contrast. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? Why I was wrong? Why I thought what I had thought. But it seems to me that we're at a point where people are so ready for college football to be back that we're starting to get to asinine claims. And let's make one thing clear here. Though I disagree with Brando's take, at least his, as opposed to Feinbaum, had some level of logic in it where I could look at and be like, that's a fair point. I can understand how, as a member of the media, you would need access to that depth chart to do your job right, to call the game adequately. Hands up, Brando, you got me there, because I do agree with you there. However, I do once again disagree with you labeling Nick Saban a bully, because right after you said that we as the media need this information to do our job, and I have no doubt Nick Saban will give it to them, but he's a bully. Well, if he's going to give it to them, then he's not a bully. I don't understand. And as you can all see, I don't do well with the drama in college football, right? It doesn't move me. It's so wild to me that this is where we are. Week 1 is here. There's no more room for drama. And that's why I had to lead it off with this. I don't even want to give this segment any more time than we already have, because it's ludicrous. The notion that Nick Saban is bullying the media. First off, when was the last time you heard Nick Saban apologize to the media? He flat out said, I'm sorry you're not getting a depth chart, and talked about the problems it created. And yesterday we talked about this on the show. Nick Saban is the master psychologist in college football. Last year, that was an Alabama team that was otherworldly talented. There's nobody out there that will debate me on that. And that really underscores why it was such a disappointing year, because the team was so talented. And they had, by all metrics, a disappointing year. Saban would be the first to tell you that. Yes, they lost 2 games. Yes, I'm sure he's proud of the fact that his team won the bowl game against Kansas State, that they rallied in several games, that they did only lose 2 games. I'm sure he's proud of that. But he still has a standard. This was an Alabama team last year that had their leader, and Will Anderson, who I love. Guys, y'all know Will Anderson is probably the reason why I have a YouTube channel, because that was the first video that really blew up that I did and allowed me to continue going. Will Anderson said going into one of the games that they felt anxious. They felt nervous. When was the last time you heard an Alabama player say they felt nervous? You're the big bad wolf. You don't move any emotion. They should feel nervous playing you. So it all ties in together, ladies and gentlemen. This is not some random thing Nick Saban has said for no reason. We just saw one of the most talented, loaded Alabama football teams of my lifetime have multiple players say, well, we felt anxious in the game. Okay, well, let's start with the psychological level here then, because we need to cut that. You are the big bad wolf in college football. Well, aptly put right now, Georgia is the big bad wolf in college football right now. To be honest, they've won back-to-back. Let's give respect where it's due. Kirby currently has the crown. That doesn't diminish from Nick's legacy, but it is a fact. Nobody can take that away from Kirby. And maybe that'll be good for Alabama, to where now they feel like they have been disrespected, and now they look up and realize, oh, we're not the big bad wolf anymore. There's the wolf over there, and we got to get back to being the hunter. Maybe that'll be good. But I was not at all surprised that we did not get a depth chart. I was not shocked. I was more surprised at the reaction that people had to not having a depth chart. To me, it was a little bit insane, but it was just interesting, something to think about. Something we do need to talk about, though, guys. I was wrong about Dominic McKinley. And we just talked about Dominic McKinley yesterday. And as we were talking about this recruiting battle, I told all of you that I thought it was largely a two-team race, the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners. However, I was sure to give a little bit of a caveat and say, but do not sleep on A&M. They have been surging in this battle, and you can never doubt Texas A&M. Elijah Robinson is a fantastic defensive line recruiter. He's in charge of the run game coordination for A&M's defense. Fantastic coach, their defensive line coach, defensive tackles coach. If we look at the guys he's successfully recruited, you're talking Walter Nolan, number 2 player in the nation, number 1 at his position. You're talking DJ Hicks, number 7 in the nation, number 1 at his position. LT Overton, top 15 player in the nation. DeMarvin Leal, top 20 player in the nation. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, top 20 player in the nation. Tunmise Adelaide, top 40 player in the nation. Anai White, top 50 player in the nation. Chase Besantis, top 50 player in the nation. Anthony Lucas, blue chip 4-star, top 60. You get the theme. I'm going to go ahead and stop there, because this is a long list and we'd be here for the next 45 minutes and we have a lot to talk about. But you get the theme I'm laying down. You cannot discount a team that you know has NIL capabilities and you know legitimately has a defensive line coach that recruits at the highest order. This was one area before NIL even came into the fold that I would talk about with Texas A&M and say, hey, I'm never surprised if they get defensive linemen, because that's one area where they seem to have kept one or two throughout the years where it's just like, man, that's a dude. It's just seemed to be something that they've kept and held on to. And so where was I wrong in the Dominic McKinley battle? Well, yesterday I told you that I thought that it was probably a two-team race with A&M on the outside looking in. I stated that I thought it was very close between Texas and Oklahoma and that A&M was third. That's where I was wrong. Now, the one thing I've realized in the past 24 hours is I have no semblance of an idea of where Dominic McKinley will go. And because of that, I'm actually more excited. I have not been this excited for a recruiting battle in a long time, because several others here recently, I've had some inclination as to where they would go. I had a good feeling. I felt like I could read the tea leaves from the information that was given. Not Dominic McKinley. Not Dominic McKinley in the best way possible. He's not moved by the attention. He's a low-key cat from everything I can tell. He wants to move in silence, take his time, make his decision. And I have a lot of respect for that. I do. I don't know how this battle is going to shake up, because I text 3 or 4 people yesterday and got 3 or 4 different responses. I heard it was Texas OU. I heard that it was Texas A&M. I heard that it was OU Texas A&M. I have heard every different variation of those 3 teams that you could possibly think of. What that tells me is we have a 3-team race, ladies and gentlemen. Texas A&M, Texas, and the Oklahoma Sooners all battling it out for a quasi 5-star defensive lineman out the state of Louisiana. Now, for some of you still sitting there, you might be thinking to yourself, well, is LSU still in this? Look, I would be hard pressed to say LSU is ever out for the number one player in their state. We know what LSU does, but this is as close to me saying they're out as I think I've ever been. And that's not from me. That's from everything I'm getting. Everybody I went to, everybody I asked, anybody I talked to, the three teams I was given, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. And I'd ask, what about LSU? One response I got was, well, they're LSU. Kids from Louisiana. They got Brian Kelly. But we feel that this is a three-team race. So that's where I was wrong yesterday. We needed to come back, sit down, revisit this conversation, because yesterday I left you all with an impression that maybe this was a two-team race. And in fairness to myself, I did go into a whole soliloquy about how Texas A&M has been a thorn in the side of college football recruiting defensive linemen. So if he did go to Texas A&M, if on Friday I'm sitting here saying it's a Texas OU battle, but A&M's on, I wouldn't have been shocked if it was A&M right there. That team that, Thomas, you put it right here. I didn't even have to say it. I didn't have to speak the evil. Ty, you're giving me PTSD from all the guys A&M has won over OU. My brother in Christ, all the guys A&M has won over everybody. It's not just OU. They got some big ones from OU. I don't doubt you there, but like everybody was after some of those cats. Everybody. Bama, Georgia, everybody. And Elijah Rushing is a real deal defensive line recruiter. That's why I always want to give you the names of the guys you need to know. When we're talking defensive line recruiting, I'm going to talk to you about a Todd Bates. I'm going to talk to you about a Freddie Roach, a Bo Davis, a Larry Johnson, for God's sake. I mean, I've heard time and time again, and frightening truth, if he's in here, he has said this 2 or 3 times in the comments, and I actually had this confirmed to me. This recruiting battle would be very interesting if Ohio State was closer in proximity, from what I was told. That's where people have told me this could shake some things up. And look, there's no surprise there. We know what Larry Johnson does on the defensive line recruiting trail. You know that Larry Johnson is a dude on the defensive line coach. Whenever I talk about him and people start commenting, man, I hope he retires soon, respectfully, because he has just been that consistent for Ohio State. So we definitely needed to revisit this. And I don't know. I'm going to be very honest with all of you. I have no idea where this recruiting battle is going to go. This is where I always tell y'all, I'm not an insider. Every now and then I'll be passed information, but it's not my job to talk about it. It's these kids' jobs to enjoy their moment. And then I get to talk about the moment after it happens. It's not my moment. It's theirs. So I don't care about being an insider. It's cool to know things, but I don't care about breaking news. I do care about trying to paint a complete picture. And from right now where I'm sitting, I think I feel very comfortable just saying, expect one of those 3 teams. Texas, Texas A&M, or Oklahoma. How it will look, I have no idea. Now, I did say yesterday that I thought he would commit to Texas, and I am going to ride out with that. I did say that I reserved the right to change my pick upon receiving new information. I still hold on to that right, but because I've gotten so much conflicting information, I think I'm just going to ride it out with the Texas pick. Right? I think that's where I am. But this is going to be really fun. I have no idea where he's going. I have messaged so many different people, gotten so many different responses. And this to me is a recruiting battle that really emphasizes why I love recruiting so much. You got a quasi 5-star guy who's a good dude by all accounts, who's just trying to go through the process as low-key as possible. And the only reason it's garnering this much attention is his talent level. Right? It's not like he's doing this trying to pump up attention. It's his talent that we're speaking for right now. It's how gifted he is. Young man is keeping his head down, going through the process. I got a lot of respect for it. And it makes this battle so much fun because I got all those different texts yesterday and all I could do is smile and think to myself, this is what it's about, man. This right here is what recruiting is all about. This battle right here. And we have been treated to some great battles in 2024. I mean, this year has been sensational in terms of recruiting. It really has. They're always treats, but this year right here has been awesome. And I don't think we're done yet. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't even hit the home stretch of Flipmas. I have a sneaking suspicion This flip miss is going to be very, very special. We need to move on, though, because I don't have a whole lot of information about Dominic McKinley, but at the point where I had heard, hey, this could be an OU A&M race. Hey, this could be an OU Texas race. Hey, this is a Texas A&M race. I heard every variation of that. So at the end of it, I just walked out of the room thinking to myself, okay, all three teams are involved at some level. All three teams have a chance at some level. Let's ride it out. We needed to revisit that conversation because I was wrong about Dominic McKinley. We need to talk about this, though. Well, let's get to some comments before we jump into this right here. Jay in the house, as always. Jay, thank you for being here. Crossbow says, Saban will be a legend forever. I'm not an Alabama fan, but an OU fan. I grew up in Norman during the fair. Yeah, Crossbow, I just think that it's so wild. People will get to this point of success, and you have two avenues, right? I think a great example of this is Tom Brady. You don't have to be a Tom Brady fan. You don't. You don't have to watch the NFL and say, Tom Brady is my favorite quarterback. But at a certain point, you kind of have to sit back and say, greatness is greatness. And we only see it so many times. So I want to sit back and enjoy greatness. When Michael Jordan was playing, you didn't have to like the Bulls. You didn't have to love Jordan. He didn't have to be your favorite player. But at a certain point, you stopped rooting against them and you sat back and you said, wow, this isn't normal. We might not see this again anytime soon. Let's enjoy it. We always go one way or the other. And for whatever reason, for individuals like a Paul Feinbaum who held Saban out as a darling to the media for so long, is now going the opposite direction and saying this man who has given so much to the SEC, so much to the University of Alabama in terms of football success, his legacy is tarnished if he doesn't win a national championship. I mean, my man can barely raise his hands anymore to have the teacher call on him because all those rings are weighing it down. What more do you want? I don't know. It was just wild to me, Crossbow. I don't know what time he's committing, Crossbow. I don't know what time. But if I'll try and find out, have that for you tomorrow or at the very least Friday. But you already know we do 2 streams on Friday. So either way, we're going to catch it. We're going to be here in the morning. We'll be here in the evening. No matter what, we'll be talking about that. And if he commits after our evening live stream, I'll make you a deal right here, Crossbow. You guys can come here as you're watching your college game day Saturday morning, and we will be live. If he commits after our evening live stream on Friday, you can take it to the bank. You can come right here, pre-game, Saturday morning. We will be live talking about it. Because that's a big commitment for no matter where he goes. I'm going to be very excited for the Longhorns and Bo Davis because y'all know I got a lot of love for Bo Davis. I got a lot of love for Bo Davis. And Sark. I got a lot of love for Todd Bates. A lot. Being an Alabama guy, and A&M, they're just interesting to me. Elijah Rushing is very interesting to me. So yeah. Anthony says, Ty, with Miami having both Zaquan Patterson and a chance of Robinson from their teammate at Ohio State as a commitment, do you think Miami? Oh, they absolutely could. Look, we cannot understate the importance of having your peers be a recruiter for you. We cannot understate that importance. I'll give you a great example of this, Anthony. We can look at a Richard Young last year for an Alabama. And Richard Young was ferocious on the recruiting trail. Now, the difference is Richard Young wasn't teammates with some of these guys, but he was on social media. He was hitting the phone lines. He was making sure that he tried to get a class together for Alabama that would be sensational. You have your college football recruiters doing the heavy work, but Jay of Unfair Sports told me this a while ago, and it makes complete sense. Why are your tutors in school, in college, largely your peers? Because it's easier to relate, to understand, to work with them. That barrier isn't there. Same goes in recruiting. Same goes for mentorship, right? That's why you love getting a veteran guy out the transfer portal. I talk about that all the time. I just never thought about it in the context of a tutor. And Jay is 100% right on that. 100% right. Think of it like a tutor. Your peers are fantastic tutors because it eliminates any barrier. The same goes for recruiting, Anthony. Your coaches are going to be after those guys, and now he has a peer in his ear. It's one thing to hear from a coach, right? Because recruits will do what I call recruit speak, where every visit was great. Whether they like to visit or not, they're trying to maintain professional relationships. So every visit was great. All my relationships with the coaches are great. Because that's the smart thing to say. Even if you didn't enjoy yourself this time, you don't want to burn a bridge. So the recruits will engage in what I call recruit speak. And you kind of have to wade through the recruit speak and try and find the nuggets of the real. And it's smart that they do this. Do not get upset at recruits for being pragmatic when it comes to business. It's the same thing as if you were in a room full of potential business clients. Maybe you and this guy right here, y'all aren't going to be able to get together and do any business Thursday. That doesn't mean that Friday or Saturday or Sunday there isn't a possibility. So you don't spit in the man's face. You shake his hand, you exchange contact information, and you keep a good working relationship. That's what these recruits are essentially doing, to be very honest with all of you. That's why sometimes people will ask, oh, well, I thought we had such a good relationship with him. That's what he has said in the interviews. Yes, that's what he has said. It's what he said about school X, school Y, school Z, school W. Because he's being pragmatic. He understands this is a business. I need to keep working business relationships. So yes, Anthony. Yes, I think it absolutely helps your chance. Unfair has the time. Jim says flipping Caden Proctor changes Bama's whole season. You might just be right on that, Jim. You might just be right on that. Coming in, left tackle, day dot, starting, true freshman. And I love that they're moving over Booker. In theory, I think I shouldn't say that. We didn't get a depth chart. In my mind, Jim, I have them moving over Booker to that left side. So I talked about this yesterday. I think your starting offensive line, you're looking at Caden Proctor at left tackle. You're looking at Tyler Booker, left guard, Seth McLaughlin, center. You're looking at Darian Dalcourt, right guard, and J.C. Latham, right tackle. I like the experience Dalcourt brings to the table. I like Seth better at center, but we cannot dismiss the experience. And Dalcourt has been a good guard. That being said, he's got Terrence Ferguson breathing down his neck. Terrence Ferguson has showed he can play winning football. So I think that the competition at that position alone will be good for Dalcourt, plus the experience he brings to the table. I think the offensive line is going to be a strong point. Love what Coach Eric Wolford has done. I think that they are some of the best hires Alabama has made. David says, as good as Caden Proctor and Caleb's down are, they are true freshmen. To me, it speaks to the current Alabama roster that both are likely to start. I completely disagree with this notion, David Williams. I don't think that that's rooted in reality. That notion is saying that no team ever has relied on a true freshman. We can look at Alabama teams that have won the national championship that have started a true freshman on the offensive line, that have started a Minka Fitzpatrick that was a true freshman. By that logic, Kelvin Banks wouldn't have been good. Like, that creates a real slippery slope. I understand what you're saying, but I think that also slaps in the face the nuance and context that we have continually seen where true freshmen can contribute to national championship teams and often do contribute to national championship teams. If we look at Georgia just last year, I don't think you would say, oh, well, Georgia's defense has a sore spot because they started a true freshman at safety, but they did. But nobody's saying they have a sore spot on defense because they started a true freshman. I think that the apt conversation to have is they have a true freshman that's so good, he blew past all the other 4 and 5 stars they have. I think that's the conversation that needs to be had, right? It's just like with Kelvin Banks. He's so good that he blew past everybody else. Now, the offensive line was in a little bit of a precarious situation, but that's because you didn't have the ability to recruit it well. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree with that notion just because it isn't rooted in the realities that we've seen. Georgia just had a starting safety when they won the national championship. Nobody was questioning whether or not safety was going to be just like the downfall of them. Malachi Starks proved to be one of the better safeties in the SEC. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that that's what I would be looking at for concern. The penalties, I think that's much more of a concerning indication than, hey, Alabama's going to start a true freshman here and there. Because as an Alabama fan, I can walk you through pretty much every Alabama team since Nick Saban's gotten there they've had true freshmen starting. That notion that Saban doesn't start freshmen, that's not true at all. He's very active in playing freshmen. I completely agree with that, David, because then how do we explain them winning national championships? If a true freshman is rated as a 5-star and he comes in and he's better than the upperclassmen could be fantastic. It's not a knock on them. I'll put it to you like this, David. You're a Texas fan. Jordan Whittington's y'all's slot guy, right? I think he's y'all's slot guy. Let me know. But I think here's a great example. Whittington might be your slot guy. If Zachariah Branch came in there, Whittington wouldn't have a job. That doesn't say anything about Whittington. That just means Zachariah Branch is Himothy. You're not keeping him off the field. I think you're looking at the same thing with Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs. So, yeah, I just don't disagree with that, David, because I don't know. You're going to have to give me some empirical data to go with that, because I just gave you empirical data in Georgia and Alabama teams that have won national championships with true freshmen. I don't know that the data supports that argument. And I'm very data driven. It's the legal analysis in me. I have got to have the facts backing the opinion. And unless we have categorical data I can point to, I have categorical data that says the opposite. I agree with what you're saying. I think you'd always want the experience of an upperclassman, but Kelvin Banks was better than a lot of tackles that were juniors and seniors last year. That's not a knock on them. There were guys that went in the second round of the NFL draft that Kelvin Banks is probably better than. It's not a knock on them. That means you guys got someone who is special. Special. So why is it just relegated to Kelvin Banks, I guess is the question. Freshmen can totally be game changers if they're ready. Look at Zach Branch. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm interested in hearing, because I believe Whittington is their slot. Sure, but that still proves my point, right? Whittington is a fine wide receiver. He's someone Texas fans are excited about, but just because Whittington is a guy Texas fans are excited about, that wouldn't mean that all of a sudden it's problematic if Steve Sarkisian won a battle for Zachariah Branch and he comes in there and starts. That means you as a staff evaluated correctly. I don't know, David. I just don't think you would find too many coaches that would look at that and say, we're not going to play true freshmen for the sake of not playing true freshmen. Football is meritocracy. If you get a guy that's better, you play him. And I don't think that is okay. Here's a great example, David. Harold Perkins. Should he not be playing because he's a freshman? I mean, he could go anywhere in the nation and be playing. That's not indicative of a team having an issue. That's indicative of Harold Perkins being Himothy. Same with Zachariah Branch. I believe we can say the same about a Caleb Downs, though we haven't seen it yet. And I can say the same about a Kelvin Banks. Kelvin Banks could transfer and take, dare I say, 97, 98% of starting left tackles' jobs tomorrow. That's not a knock on those left tackles. That's a praise on Kelvin Banks. So I get you, but I just don't think we're going to agree on that, my man. I just don't think so, because I just think that there are way too many examples I can turn to of teams who employ true freshmen. I get the basic argument, but I just don't think that it's the end-all be-all of being negative. I think you'd always want the experience, but you recruit for a reason. If that was the case, teams would forego recruiting in favor of the transfer portal, because then experience would be the end-all be-all. So yeah, I love the discussion, though. I actually think there is a discussion to be had there. Love the discussion. One thing we need to talk about today, and this might be the last. No, it's not going to be the last. We still need to talk about the Big 10 in Michigan. But one thing we definitely need to talk about today is Oklahoma's offense, because everybody is talking about Oklahoma's defense and how they need to make strides, and I have led that conversation. I have. I'm not going to shy away from that. I have. But one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that the Oklahoma offense could actually be a major benefit to Oklahoma's defense. And let me explain. Because last year, there was something that we saw with the Oklahoma offense. They're an offense that can score quickly. Jeff Lebby has that creativity to them. They have that explosiveness to them. But at the same time, if your defense is struggling, if your defense is reeling, you must come back and ask the question, is the ability to score in 4 plays conducive to success? I think if you have a stout defense, the answer is sure, score at will. If your defense is where you want it, open up the floodgates, score at will. But if your defense is struggling, the last thing you want to do is have an offense go out there 3 and out, and then you put the defense right back on the field, the defense that's been on the field for a 13-play drive. Now they're on the field for another 13-play drive. Your offense comes out, and within 6 plays, they're off. Your defenses. That was something we saw from Oklahoma's offense last year. The defense was struggling, and the offense would be being able to find success, but because of the manner in which they were doing it, they would almost put more pressure on the defense because it was a feast or famine offense with the Oklahoma Sooners. It was either a quick 3 and out or a quick score. Either way, the result was your defense was quickly back on the field. Luckily, Oklahoma has the means to change that. The wide receiver talent, very intrigued about how they're going to replace some of the names they lost. Really excited about Petaway as a true freshman. Dylan Gabriel's there. That veteran presence at quarterback, I think, will be good. We saw Jackson Arnold already at quarterback, too. That makes complete sense to me. But the running backs that Oklahoma has, we looked at that depth chart. You see Marcus Major. You see Tawee Walker. You see Javonte Barnes. You see Gavin Sawchuk. Oklahoma, if they can get into a situation where they're running the ball, establishing the run, and taking chunk of time off the clock, that will be a massive help for your defense. Being able to have your offense and defense work in relation to each other will be a massive help to your defense. And I fully expect the Oklahoma defense to be a unit that's better. But let's also acknowledge this. They're a unit that's still going to be learning. Brent's only been there a year. I expect strides to be made. No doubt about that. I don't think anybody in the nation's doubting that. But we also have to be cognizant and realize Brent calls an aggressive scheme of defense now. Very aggressive, very cognizant. Your offense can help your defense, but it must help your defense. And odd future, you're not wrong. It's not an OU thing. Every Lebby-led offense, that team is one of the worst in time. OU was dead last in the conference in that stat. It isn't just an OU thing, nor even a Lebby thing. It's funny, odd future. It's worked out for Texas, but whenever Texas was making their hires, I was talking to Homer, and actually he was sitting in the studio I'm sitting right now because Homer actually used to live right down the street from me. That's how we got to know each other, is he hit me up and was like, you look like your profile pictures at the courthouse in Denton. Come to find out, we were like 2 blocks from each other. That just happened to work out. So he would come over, watch UFC fights, and we'd chop it up. But whenever y'all had made those hires, Homer was actually worried about this as well, because he looked at it and he said, okay, well, we have Sark who scores really quickly, and we have a defense that's more of a bend but don't break. And those two things can work, but it can also really go the other way. Now, in fairness, it hasn't, right? For the most part, it's worked out for Texas. But you are right, odd future. Lebby and Lane Kiffin, that style of offense, they want to score quick. That's the whole name of the game. Steve Sarkisian has one of my favorite quotes, and it is true, where he's like, why would I want to score in 13 plays when I could score in 3, 4, 5? And his reasoning for it, in fairness, is completely true. He's saying, hey, every play I run, there's a greater chance that we will get a penalty. We will jump off sides. There will be a holding call, that there will be something to derail us. So why do I want to extend the drives that long? Hey, that makes sense to me. I get you there. That checks out. I'm not a genius, but even I can see 2 + 2 sometimes equals 4. That's one of those times. But for Oklahoma, your defense is in a complete rebuild, like a complete scheme shift, total philosophy change. The Oklahoma offense has the ability to help the Oklahoma defense. And that's something I really hope we see this year. Because that ability to have an off-speed pitch, I also think will be big for Jeff Lebby. I think Jeff Lebby is a brilliant offensive mind. I think he is going to be a name in the game to keep up with. but he needs to develop that off-speed pitch. It's something I asked for from Oklahoma as they went into the Nebraska game. He started realizing, hey, this team can score really quick, but what happens when they play a team that has a pulse, when they play a team that might be able to generate some 3 and outs? The last thing you want to do is look at the stat sheet and they held the ball for 3/4 of the game. And unfortunately, Oklahoma lost the time of possession battle far too much, which, in fairness, Oklahoma fans, it's actually kind of impressive when you look at your season, you look at how you lost the time of possession battle, and then you think how many losses were only by 1 score. In a roundabout way, that's pretty impressive. I'm not even trying to meme right now. That is pretty impressive. And I think that does show that you need to have faith and patience in the staff. Because there were a lot of other coaches, other staffs, where if you gave them that disparity in time of possession, I don't know that they lose games by 1 score. I think that there are other programs that would have had their teeth kicked in. And Oklahoma didn't. They didn't. Outside of the one game where they didn't have their quarterback, they didn't get their teeth kicked in. And so that's one of the areas where I do feel like, hey, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you're going to have growth. I don't doubt growth. We're going to see that. It's Brent Venables. He's a brilliant defensive mind, right? He's a brilliant mind in football. You got Todd Bates, brilliant mind in football. You got Brandon Hall, who's been fantastic on the trail. You got a lot going for you. But the Oklahoma offense can be a major catalyst to helping this Oklahoma defense. David says the fact that every successful drive will not be the result of a short scoring drive. In fact, most will not, to me, means that offenses have to be built on being able to sustain. I completely agree, David. I completely agree. Now, look, if you're Sark gets a pass. Lane gets a pass. Lebby, he's brilliant. He's just young, right? Like, he's going to be a good offensive mind. There's a reason why Nick Saban wanted to interview him. There's a reason why Kiffin took him under his wing. But he just needs to develop that off-speed pitch, which in fairness, he has. But he's just molded from that tree of like, if I can score in 3 plays, I'm going to score in 3 plays. But David, I completely agree with you, man. I completely agree with you. It's good to have the ability to have long sustaining drives because then your offense is playing defense. I'll put it to you like this, guys. We can look at one game right now to really prove this sentiment for me. Notre Dame versus USC in October. You don't think that Notre Dame's game plan is to pound the ball? 14 play drives? Let's run all the clock out. Our defense isn't an issue, but you want to know the best defense Notre Dame can bring to the table? The best possible defense Notre Dame can play against USC? Keep Caleb Williams on the damn sideline. Don't let him on the field. It's that simple because that USC offense is that dangerous. I mean, you could bring in there the best defense. They have the playmakers to get something going. Let's be honest here. The best defense, keep him on the sideline. We're not worried about the USC defense the way we're worried about their offense. Keep Caleb on the sideline. We're going to pound the rock. And we're going to just play time of possession game. David, I completely agree with you, man. Completely agree with you. Yeah. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head right there. And there's so many games we can look at to prove that. And Chris, this is a great point, and that's why I stopped myself just a second ago. And when I was saying Lebby needs to develop the off-speed pitch, I went back and said he has it, but he needs to continue working on it, right? Like I know you got the fastball. What's your slider looking like? What are your because we saw it in Florida State. Now, if you play that bully brand of football all year long, your defense isn't on the field as much. And then it's just as simple as numbers game. So that's something to keep up with. ACC defensive coordinator said very one-dimensional perspective of what a team that faced him a lot during his time. Look, it can be. It certainly can be, but that's why he has the ability. You're not wrong, Anthony. And I think this is the juxta of what we're saying. He's a brilliant offensive mind. He's got this high-powered offense down, but you also have to have that off speed. We know you have the high-powered off speed, as Chris pointed out. We have seen, we know you have the high power offense. We've seen the off-speed pitch. I just need more of it. I need to see it time and time again. They have the capabilities. They have some of the talent to do so. And Bill Bedenbaugh's your offensive line coach. Right? We talked about that. That's one of the few places in college football. I'm going to give you all the benefit of the doubt. Y'all, Michigan, Sharon, wherever Sharon Moore is, I'm probably going to be inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt because it's Sharon Moore. David, I am very excited for Devin Campbell, bro. I am so excited for him. Yeah. That UT offensive line is going to be a ton of fun to watch this year. Cannot wait for week 2. Bama versus UT. What more could you want as a college football fan? I mean, come on. Come on. That wide receiving core for Texas against that defensive backfield for Alabama. The defensive front for Alabama really trying to find their identity again. Going up against one of the more talented units in the nation. Coached by an offensive line coach I really admire, and Kyle Flood. Coached by an offensive coordinator I think incredibly highly of, and Steve Sarkisian. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, man. Week 2 cannot get here quick enough. It is going to be awesome. But let's talk about some Big 10, right? Let's talk about the Big 10. Because there's a lot of interesting chatter going on in the Big 10. Everywhere I turn, I see Penn State is supposed to win the Big 10. And look, I get it. Penn State has some talented pieces now. Penn State has made some moves. Love their running back. Excited to see what Aller can do. Very talented kid. But they have to replace their full-time starting quarterback from last year. All right? That, to me, is something of note to talk about. The reason why I think it's of note to talk about is because Michigan exists. When we look at the Big Ten right now, there's this interesting phenomena that we see. That we look at Ohio State, they have to replace a quarterback. Ohio State also trying to get their defense back right. That's going to be something I'm really interested in seeing. Ryan Day, we talked about this the other day, no pun intended, when we were talking about coaches that could be on the hot seat, and some of you asked me about Ryan Day. The thing I will give Ryan Day, and the reason why I wouldn't put him on the hot seat, he's made a college football playoff. He's recognized that there are things wrong with Ohio State, and he's recognized I cannot sustain in my current capacity and get to the promised land. We got to pivot. And I think if a guy is still finding success, he's still giving you winning games, he's still in big games, he's still pushing for a college football playoff, you can't fire him then unless it just continues to go on and on and on for years. Because right now, he's at the very least saying, hey, I hear you. I hear you. It's not going the way I want either. But this right here needs to be, he's working. He's actually working. And that's something I will say for Ryan Day. He's not sitting there looking at an issue and saying, maybe next year it'll get fixed. Oh, no, not in 2024. Possibly 2025 will have that fixed. That's not what he's doing. He is proactive, and I like that. If you've listened to my content and you've heard me talk about this conference realignment, you'll know my biggest complaint with the Pac-12 is they sat on their hands. The Big 12 didn't. The Big 10 didn't. The SEC didn't. Nobody else sat on their hands, and I think I'd give that same sort of credence to a Ryan Day. He's not sitting on his hands. So they're going to have a lot in motion this year. Ohio State is. But the team that gives me the biggest pause for a Penn State possibly winning the Big Ten is Michigan. Because Michigan returns pretty much everything. They bring back the quarterback. They bring back the running backs. They have Sharon Moore. Harbaugh's self-suspended for a few games, but let's be honest. As long as he's back by the games that matter, it doesn't matter. There's one thing we need to see from Michigan. And in fairness, need is a strong word. If Michigan can develop a downfield passing game where they get proficient at attacking defenses 15 to 20 yards downfield consistently, they're going to be dangerous, really dangerous. And McCarthy has shown the ability to do it. We just need to see it full time. This is a big year for Michigan. You return so much. The pressure is on in a way that's a little bit different than the pressure Harbaugh has previously felt at Michigan. Heck, a few years ago, I was sitting here asking the question. I understand Harbaugh is an alum. I understand all of this, but it's not going anywhere right now. Now, I've had to eat crow several times, and I will continue to bring up the fact that I was wrong there because it's at a point that needs to be understood. I need to also understand where I was wrong, why I was wrong, and why I thought what I had thought. But the pressure Harbaugh is feeling now, there's no question that it's different than what he's felt before. Before they'd made the college football playoffs, the pressure was, can Jim Harbaugh break through the proverbial ceiling, beat Ohio State, and make the college football playoffs? Well, now we have that answer. The answer to that is a resounding yes. Now a different type of pressure has encroached on the Wolverines. You've broken through the proverbial ceiling that is Ohio State. You've broken through the proverbial ceiling that is getting into the college football playoff. Can you break through the proverbial ceiling and win a national championship? That remains to be seen. But I would love to remind everybody that winning a national championship is no easy feat. Bear Bryant said it best when he said, you've got to be very good, you've got to be very talented, you've got to be very disciplined, and most of all, you've got to be lucky. All things are true. True facts are true. So Michigan is a very fascinating team to me this year. In fact, I think you could make an argument that they are a top 3 team in interest in college football this year. You have one of the biggest fan bases, one of the biggest brands, coached by one of the most recognizable names, a veteran team in the Big 10, one of the biggest conferences, playing in some of the biggest games. I mean, come on now. That game with Ohio State is going to be must-see this year. That game with Penn State is going to be must-see. I think they're going to crush Michigan State. But the Big 10 is really interesting now. And through all this, we still have to have a conversation about Matt Rule and the expectations of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who in a lot of ways I look at very similarly to some other teams, such as a Colorado. Not in the same vein, but in the same logic that, hey, he needs to be given his time to really come in here, revamp the system, and make the changes necessary for Nebraska to be the team so many people remember. I am just young enough to remember Nebraska. I'm sorry, I'm just old enough to remember Nebraska, just young enough for it to be a very distant memory. Very distant memory. But I'm just old enough to remember those Crouch teams. Really, the formidable years of me watching football when the Nebraska defense was the vaunted black shirt defense, and you knew you didn't want to see them. They haven't had that in a while. And if you're a Nebraska fan, you're excited, but you also have to acknowledge that the Big 10, it's a competitive league. It's not the easiest league to turn around in. It's a great league to be a field goal kicker. I joking about Iowa, but you get the point. It is a good league. But the team to watch for me in the Big 10 is a boring team. It's a team that all of you are already aware of. So I feel halfway bad saying this is the team to focus on. But I'd be lying if I pointed somewhere else. We have now seen a transition in the type of pressure that Jim Harbaugh is under. He broke through the last time. Can he break through this time? That's something I can't wait to see. Let's hit some comments. Ooh, Chris, this is a statement, man. It's a statement. J.J. McCarthy has a higher upside than Drake May. That's a statement. Look, I like both guys, but Drake May, I mean, he is so good. Really, we talked about this the other day. Someone asked me, what game do I think is happening week 1 that isn't getting the attention it deserves? You know, yesterday we talked about last night I was on the Bama Standard. Yesterday morning we talked about Florida versus Utah. That's a game you got to know about. We're going to be talking about Florida State, LSU, of course. That South Carolina, North Carolina game, man, that's about as close to a must-watch game as we're getting week 1. And I don't see many people talking about it. Drake May, after losing Josh Downs, battling it out against Spencer Rattler, when we've heard Shane Beamer sing the praises of Spencer Rattler. And for those of you that have been heavy involved in recruiting, you know Spencer has the ability. Got a great arm. Can it come together has always been the question, and that's a question we've been asking about South Carolina. And I love when things come together like a nice little present with a bow, where I get to ask the same question about a team that I get to ask about their quarterback. can this be the year it comes together? What better way to find out than seeing you duel one of the premier names at the quarterback position, Drake May? God, what a game. Can't wait. The one, the only, the man of the hour, Hayes Fawcett in here. Thank you so much for being in here. As always, man, if y'all aren't following Hayes on Twitter, I just don't know what you're doing. Go over to Twitter, follow him. He's got you covered for all the recruiting headlines. Hayes, I'm in an absolute blender on this Dominic McKinley situation. I have no idea where he's going to go. Yesterday, I got on here and said, hey, I think it's a Texas OU battle, A&M surging. Today, I come on here. From the people I've texted, I've heard Texas OU, A&M OU, A&M Texas. I've heard every variation of those three teams. But what that does mean for me, I'm just super excited because I have no idea where this cat's going to go. And one of those teams is going to get an unbelievably gifted player. You would understand, as someone who loves recruiting as much as you do, Hayes, that's what this is all about. A kid keeping his head down, going about the process. And now we have three powerful brands all going after a 5-star kid that could be a difference maker anywhere. Come on. That's what recruiting is. He loves going out on a limb and sawing it off. Yeah. True. True. By the time Eric Crouch became the quarterback in Nebraska, they were already in the Big 10, or are they still? I believe they were in the Big 12. I don't think that move had happened to the Big 10 yet. One thing about Longhorn Nation that I do not agree with is that the view might be susceptible this year to losing. I don't think that they are. Oh, David, I don't agree with either side of that argument. I don't agree with the Texas fans who think that, hey, Bama's going to go in there and we're going to give them a swift kick in the teeth, nor do I agree with the Alabama side of fans that are saying, hey, we're going to roll Texas. This is going to be a game, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be one where they put the boxing gloves on, they meet in the middle of the octagon, they tie their front legs together, and they stand and trade. We're in for a good old-fashioned fight. Now, one team may end up scoring a lot, but I can promise you this. This game is going to be a treat. Texas is hungry. They've heard the chatter for years. They've heard the chatter. They want this. They want this the bad way. Sark has something to prove, and what better way to prove it than against Saban? And it's not personal for Sark against Saban, anything but that. I think Sark, the relationship those two have is really awesome. It truly is. The way Sark talks about Saban, it's very reminiscent to me of the way Lane Kiffin talks about Saban. Those two are guys that you can't attack Saban without those two guys probably taking offense to it. Certainly not Lane. If you say something about Saban for whatever reason, Lane Kiffin instantly activates his Twitter and gets on go mode. It's awesome to see. But Sark and Saban have got a really crazy good relationship, from what I understand. I could be wrong, but from everything I've been told, they've got a very good relationship because of the manner in which Sark's career was able to be turned around from his time at Alabama. And he did his deal. Went there, did great with Alabama, went to the NFL, came back to Alabama, won a national championship in a year where some of the most beautiful play calling I've ever seen. In fact, David, Texas fans, if y'all are in here, I have a video going back to when he was at Bama, breaking down some of the plays of that national championship. And I mean, the video is even titled, Steve Sarkisian was in his bag in the national championship, because he was. The orbit motions, the this, that, and the other. It was a treat to watch. But Sark views Saban almost as someone who was able to resurge his career for him to be in the position he is. So when I say that Sark wants to prove it to Saban, is almost showing Saban, hey, the risk you took on me, the risk you took on bringing me here, it's worth it. This is who I have become. And in a lot of ways, you are always going to be tied to that journey. So when I say Sark wants to prove it to Saban, it's not I want to beat you and rub it in your face. No, it's this admission of, you took a chance on me. And I want to show you that that chance was well worth it by becoming the best version of myself as a head coach I can possibly be. Because by doing that, I am doing you justice. You took the chance on me to allow me to be the best version of myself I can be. The thing I can do to repay you is to go out and be the best version of myself, to be the best mentor I can, and to find success. This is going to be an awesome game, guys. This is going to be an unbelievable game. The fact that we're treated to it week 2. Oh, awesome. Awesome. I mean, I'm so excited. I also have a little bit of a bet going on with this game. Frightening's not in here, but have a little bit of a bet going on with him. Chris says Texas has been starving. Yeah, but that's part of the reason why they're dangerous. Because they've heard. Right? It's only a matter of time. And this is a very talented Texas team. I know we can say that about others, but even, Chris, you and I have had this conversation, right? Even when we get past all of the jokes, the way this Texas team is built, if I had to bet on a Texas team, this would be the one where I would say, like, hey, this is the one that's most built for success. Like, out of all the ones where we've heard, hey, Texas is going to be good this year, this is the one time where I'd be like, okay, I can start to see it, though. The way you're building the team. It needs to be shown. I've said this before, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I don't think there's any excuse for Texas not to have 10 wins this year. I think that's the standard. So I'm not shying away from that. Certainly, you're right. It has to happen. Results must be shown, but I do like the team they're bringing to the table. Dawes says, as an outsider OU fan, so slightly biased. Hey, that's what this is all about. Rep your fandom, of course. Bama has only lost 5 at home. I just don't see it happening. Yeah, that's wild, isn't it? Man's got more rings than losses at home. That just doesn't even make sense. But Dawes, at that same vein, it could happen. It absolutely could. This is a Texas team that took Alabama to the wire last year without Quinn Ewers. Quinn's going to be back. Bama's, I think, in a better headspace this year. That was also a Bama team that had 17 penalties against Texas. Got away with few. The refs in that game were terrible on both sides. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying Bama didn't get away with some calls. They did. The refs were awful. But there were some missed calls all the way around. That was just a poorly officiated game all the way around. I'll be the first to concede that. But this is a very real ball game, man. They've got the playmakers, and anytime you have a Steve Sarkisian and you have the level of weapons he has on the outside, you've got to be aware. You've got to really be aware of what he can do. Ty, I know that Michigan got to the playoff based on their running game, but can they repeat relying on just a running game twice to get to the playoff? And Anthony, this is why I asked the question I asked. This is why I asked the question I asked. Can Michigan develop that downfield passing game? I don't need you to be USC. I don't need you to be 2019 LSU. I don't need you to be 2020 Bama, where you are just bombs over Baghdad at will. I mean, just go and you are slinging it. That's not what I need you to be from Michigan. I mean, those offenses, the USC offense, that 2019 LSU offense, that 2020 Bama offense, they would literally just look at their receivers and say, go. And you couldn't catch them. They were outrunning people. I'm fairly certain that Devontae Smith is still running away from the Ohio State defense somewhere. Just a rumor. But you're right. You're 100% right, Anthony. And it goes into what I say. You can't be one-dimensional. And I talk about that all the time in relation to USC and them needing a defense, but certainly that argument goes for offense. It's part of the reason why I was sure to say yesterday when someone asked me, Ty, and a very good question that I was asked, a question that should be asked because a discussion should be had. If there's a misunderstanding, a discussion is necessary. People were asking me, Ty, are you concerned that Bama had to revolutionize their offense, get a more powerful offense, and now they're saying they want to go back to a more run-based offense? And I said, no, I'm not concerned about that in the least because we have to understand the context of why it was said. Nick Saban said they wanted to get back to a power run offense after Bryce Young left in a year where they just literally gave the ball to Bryce and say, whatever happens, happens. Go do your thing. They relied on Bryce too much. So in my opinion, what Saban is saying is, no, we want to rely on scheme as opposed to rely on our quarterback bailing us out. And I think that got inflated. Everybody's pretending like Bama's not going to throw the football. No, what he's saying is we want to rely on scheme. We don't want to rely on Superman bailing us out every play. Because last year, Bama's offense was at their best when Bryce was freestyling. And that's not where you want to be, respectfully. Like, that's not where you want to be at all. Bryce is a great player. That's not what you want. Rand, my man, he says, if the Bama defense is legit, I think Texas loses by 3. If it's not, I think Texas wins by 3. But a fun game either way. If we lose by 14, back to the drawing board. Man, there's a lot of good in this comment, Rand. As always, man, thank you for being here. Love when you're here to contribute to the conversations. I think you're on to some things, but I think I would need to see. And I'm mainly saying I think I would need to see to the second half of your comment here, Rand. If we lose by 14, back to the drawing board, maybe. I think we would also need to see what's the Alabama offense look like down the stretch and what does the Texas defense look like down the stretch, because 14 points can happen during the course of a game. So I think that it would depend on how it happened, but certainly if you lose by 3 points, you walk out this game. And if you lose by 3 points and Bama plays well, or if Bama loses by 3 points, but Texas looks fantastic, Bama looked like a good team. The reason why this game is so awesome, both of these teams are getting a very real look in the mirror week 2. And you want to know what's beautiful about that mirror? That mirror will not be the end-all be-all to the college football playoff. If Texas wins the Big 12, they're alive. Their hopes are still alive, even if they win that, even if they lose to Alabama. If Alabama loses the game to Texas, if they win the SEC, their playoff hopes are still alive. Both teams will be better, barring injury, which we certainly hope both teams make it out of that game as healthy as they walked it in there. Their seasons are still in front of them, and all you have is playing a really good team to get you prepped for the season in front of you. For Texas's case, you're not going to face another team outside the Red River rivalry, because that's a rivalry. Crazy things happen in that game. That's one of those few games in college football where one team could be an absolute powerhouse and the other team could be just down in the dumps, and still all wisdom goes out the door during that game. Any conventional logic gone during that game. So Oklahoma is the one asterisk, right? Because that being a rivalry game, emotions are high, crazy things happen. That's what makes it so beautiful. Outside of that game, you look at the rest of Texas's schedule, and I like Tech. I think there are teams that are going to be interesting in the Big 12, but you don't feel like after the Alabama game, you still look at that Oklahoma game, acknowledging that, hey, that's a rivalry game. It's going to be wild. But you look at your schedule and say, we've faced the best. Everything is in front of us now. We faced a team that has more 5 stars than you can shake a stick at. Everything else is in front of us right now. I love that. I love that. If you think Texas heard the noise, what do you think Bama has heard? Oh, Cam, I completely agree. And I got to talk yesterday. I'm on the Bama Standard, the final whistle. So I could talk to Chris James, Justin Riley, Matt Caddell, a lot of guys that played, right? And even then, Stephen M. Smith was on. So you're talking about guys who were in the media room asking Nick Saban questions after scrimmages, after practices. I am very fortunate to be in a position where I get to talk to these guys now, interact with them. They've heard. They know. That's what I'll say. Bama has heard. They know. In fairness, you still got to show me. Hearing is one thing. I'm glad you heard it. I'm glad it moved you. Now show me. And when they show me, we'll be back, right? We'll have that conversation. But until they show me, we're still in the theoretical stage. We're going to hit some comments and then get out of here. Ty, I understand Bama offers NFL-style development from the head coach and their position coaches, but a reason why some kids transfer out of Bama because they can't deal with coach on top of them. Yeah, no, Anthony, 100%. Bama's not for everybody. I think this is a great discussion, Anthony. I love this comment. I really do love this comment because I think this leads us into a discussion that many people don't have because it's a little bit of an uncomfortable discussion, but a necessary discussion. There's a great example this year of a player, DeMarcus Riddick, 5-star linebacker. This kid is unbelievable. If he wanted to flip to Bama tomorrow, I'd be over the moon. In fact, some of you have heard he was one of the guys, as I said, might be a must-land prospect for Alabama. He was a former Georgia commit who flipped from Georgia to Auburn. Now, it's important to note that the entirety of the time before his flip, everybody thought he would flip from Georgia to Alabama. Now, when he was talking about why Auburn, one of the things he said was, hey, I want to have fun in college. Winning isn't everything to me. I want to be a part of something where we turn something around. That is a completely valid reason for wanting to pick an Auburn, wanting to stay in the state of Alabama, because DeMarcus Riddick is from Alabama. So he gets to stay home, and he wanted to be a part of a program where he could really be in the building blocks of turning Auburn around. That is a completely legitimate reason for picking an Auburn. That's completely legitimate. There are 1,000 different reasons why any kid could go to any college or why any college might not be for Alabama. Another great example of this, Anthony, is when Kayvon Thibodeau was watching the national championship, whenever Bama was just dragging Ohio State. He was talking about how whenever Nick Saban came to recruit him, Nick Saban looked at Kayvon Thibodeau dead in the face and said, "You're not going to play when you think you're ready to play. You're going to play when I tell you you're ready to play." Kayvon Thibodeau looked at the guys on that panel and said, "That's the moment I knew that Bama wasn't for me and I wasn't going to Bama." That's perfectly fair. That's fair. Everybody is after something different. That's perfectly fair. We need to understand Bama is not like other places. This is a machine. They eat, sleep, breathe football. That's it. Like that's what they do. It is a business there. You get a degree in football. Joking, of course, but you get the point. It always brings me back to another thing Saban told a recruit whenever he was recruiting Jonathan Allen. And I think this all paints the picture on who Saban is, right? He sat down in front of Jonathan Allen, who is a top-paid NFL defensive tackle, has had a healthy career in the NFL. He looked at that man dead in the face and say, "You can join us or not, but I'm either going to win with you or I'm going to win without you. The choice is yours." And he walked out. That's not for everybody. The last example, Anthony, I'll give you, because I've given you all the examples of Saban doing this and it working out. How about it not working out? Player that was committed to Alabama commits and goes to hug Nick Saban. Well, Nick Saban doesn't hug him. He sticks out his hand for a handshake. They shake hands. That always stayed with the recruit because the recruit, something his family did, they were huggers. All of his family. That was just an expression they had. That meant something to him. He ended up decommitting from Alabama. He ended up going to Georgia, having a great career there. But that wasn't an illegitimate reason for not committing. Guys, you have to understand, you're leaving home for 3 to 4, maybe 5 years, depending if you redshirt, maybe you get injured. It could be longer. You're leaving home to go someplace different. Finding comfort there is not surprising to me. Anthony, I love this comment because I think it leads the way for a discussion that's necessary. Not every place is for everybody, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. Not every 5-star is for Bama. Bama is not for every 5-star. That's perfectly okay. It doesn't have to be. What matters is you find the kids that you work for and that they work for you. That's what recruiting is all about. Last one, Ty, thoughts on Kyle McCord? I think he's going to light it up this year. A lot of naysayers, though. Look, I'm excited for Kyle McCord. I'm not going to lie to you. Devin Brown is very intriguing to me. I don't think that this is done, Chris. I think Devin Brown is a name to watch. But Kyle, I mean, look, we talked about this. How many times have we talked about this, Chris? Especially you and I off camera. Everybody talks about that damn wide receiver room for Ohio State, and deservedly so. They have been stacking blue chip quarterbacks for years. They've been stacking blue chip quarterbacks. So I think their quarterback situation will be fine. They've recruited very talented ones, but we have to see. But I'm not completely out on Devin Brown just yet. But I do agree with you. I think Kyle McCord has all the tools you want. And when I say I don't think Devin Brown is out of it, that's not a situation where I'm saying it's something Kyle McCord can't do. I think Kyle McCord has the ability. Devin Brown, when he came out, and Chris, I think you might remember I told you this whenever he came out. he's got ability. He's got a lot of ability. Homer and I sat down and talked about Devin Brown, and we thought he was underrated. So excited to see what happens with Ohio State. Guys, that's about it. We've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. We will be back. SEC Connect this evening. We'll be back tomorrow with some content, whether that's in the form of a live stream or not. I don't know. Heck, we've gone every day this week. We might as well continue the streak. So probably be back here tomorrow, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Another episode of Through the Haze. We'll get it going. More football to talk about, more games to break down. Can't wait to see you. Until then, that's it. See ya.